Climate change activists have been agitating the media for years, pushing news organizations to do more about climate change and to adopt more urgent language like crisis. While news outlets have followed along, others aren't yet ready to declare a climate emergency.
If you watch ABC's World News Tonight, you'd think the Earth was on the brink of the apocalypse.
Tonight, the state of emergency, a potential hurricane now bearing down.
But coverage of floods, tornadoes, snowstorms, and mudslides don't really get to the heart of the issue. It's not about the weather, it's about climate.
By the year 2080, Philadelphia will have the climate of Memphis, Tennessee.
Climate change, though, is rarely on the daily rundown. In an effort to change that, 6 Florida news organizations are teaming up to tackle the issue.
The climate crisis in Florida, we felt like none of us could do the job alone, and we thought we could do a pretty good job if we pulled our resources together, or at least amplified our voices together.
South Florida Sun-Sentinel editor Julie Anderson says the collaboration is both a milestone in journalism and a service to readers.
This is also a business story. It's a local story. This really crosses very many different beats.
But what to call it? The Guardian and several other publications are calling it a climate emergency, a crisis, even genocide, language that is creeping into broadcasts as well.
Here's something that is actually a growing emergency.
Others, though, argue for a more nuanced approach.
I also want to be careful in terms of looking like we're an advocacy group, that we're not.
On the other hand, direct language may be necessary when staring down bald-faced idiocy.
But, the planet renews itself, and I just am doubtful that man is causing the warming.
This is not a whodunit.
Yikes. I mean, this is... Anyway, I've never seen anything like this, where newspapers, competitors, all are from different regions, they don't directly, but they're pooling their resources, and they're going to have beat reporters. I mean, this is going to get a lot of attention.
This is an unusually ambitious effort for news organizations to pool their resources, but it's not unprecedented. We are seeing more and more cooperation, in large measure because none of these news organizations are able to do it on their own anymore. You know, I think more and better coverage of climate change is certainly a good thing. No question about that. But I do think the idea of climate emergency and climate apocalypse and all of this, it plays into this idea that I don't really think is true, that if only we can light ourselves on fire and scream loud enough, we're going to convince the minority of the audience out there that still doesn't accept this. It doesn't work this way. It's tribal more than it is informational.
As Julie Anderson, I think, said, you start adapting the language of the activists and the advocates, and you don't want to do that.
No.
Well, from a news consumer standpoint, I don't think the problem is a lack of news about climate change. I mean, I applaud what these papers are doing, but the problem as you're just reading and approaching these stories is it's so large and vast that you have no sense as an individual, short of going zero waste and, you know, eliminating all plastic for your life and upending your life, you know, from a regular person's standpoint, what do you do about it? So that level of solutions journalism, I think, would be really useful. That level of like, how do people on an individual and on a collective level actually make change? That's what we need.
I have a couple of points. The idea of the consortium really is a wave of the future, and it's been here. This is really not the first time. You've got groups like the Society of Environmental Journalists. You've got ProPublica. You've got Inside Climate News. Groups that have been growing and growing are helping publications. The Florida connection just makes all the sense in the world because Florida is its own environment. And really needs that kind of combination. So I think you'll see more and more of it. The point you were making about making this relevant to people, you know, another thing is that individual publications have to have an expert looking at this. Here we've got David Abel at the Boston Globe, who's an expert in that field. We used to have Beth Daly, who moved over a few years ago to Inside Climate News, it's now a pretty big outfit. So
she's now at another
she's moved
on, but she did a great job there.
But what a local paper can do or local news organization is look at how things are affecting you. You know, you can look at what's happening with the fishing industry. Yeah. It's a huge issue in Massachusetts. And maple syrup, you know, things that we really count on.
Yeah, right. That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good business
good citizenship and good journalism for news organizations to respect their customers. I think that's how you build and hold your customers, your customer base. And in an era where seemingly so many people, especially on the right but also on the left, are lightning quick to assume that news organizations are promoting their own agenda, and they're very hostile and resentful toward that. You don't need those scare words. Do you need to call what's going on with the Red Line these days an MBTA crisis? Or would words like breakdown and failure suffice? People that are suffering through it, I think, can layer on their own sense of proportion and magnitude to what's going on. They don't need us to jam it down their throats.
Then we've got the issue of the cachet that's put on it politically when you come up with a term like the Green New Deal. Is this Roosevelt, again? And we're thinking, does it have to be associated with a political party?
This weekend, New Orleans may be washed away again, and it will be interesting to see whether network television in particular is able to bring themselves to link this directly to climate change.
Oh, Anderson Cooper's going to go down. He's going to be waist deep, and he's going to say all the emergency words. Mark my words.
More interesting will be to see if all that flooding infrastructure they put in place is going to work.
It's supposed to be the highest since 1927, so I wouldn't count on it.
Yeah, when Anderson's in the super tight T-shirt, that's when you know it's a real crisis.